it was very, very clear to me that if India were to abstain or to sit on the fence, as it were, that could do immeasurable damage to the prospects for the civil nuclear deal in the United States Congress, because members of Congress were still to be convinced at that point. We were also just beginning work on the separation agreement between India and the United States with regard to separation of facilities in India, and these things were early days. So it was appropriate for me to reflect to the Indian government the dangers of not supporting a vote on Iran. It would be very, very damaging to their prospects, and I think that it was a key thing to do, and to do well.
Okay.
I would not call it arm twisting. The decision was certainly up to the Indian government, which eventually they made.
Can I quote to you from something that you said in your cable at that time to the State Department? After pointing out to Shyam Saran that congressmen were linking India's position on the vote on Iran with the prospects of the Indo-US nuclear deal and calling this a wake-up call for India, you then said India is sufficiently concerned to restate its position on Iran's nuclear program. We have an opportunity as a result. Doesn't that suggest that you at least believed that your arguments, what I call your pressure, was working on India?
Well, I think the evidence points to the fact that when they understood the nature of the problem that was faced, they made what I would regard as the appropriate decision in their own self-interest. Because the civil nuclear deal, as we all know, took 3.5 years to do. It was extremely complicated, both technically and politically. And it was a very high priority for both of our governments to complete that deal.
Okay.
It required, you may remember, a change in United States legislation, the first change in the Atomic Energy Act since 1954. And that was a very, very big issue for members of Congress, who at the early phase were not supportive. They had to be convinced, and that took a lot of work.
Let me put it like this, Ambassador Man Singh. Look at the chronology. Just hours before the Indian Prime Minister met George Bush in New York on the 13th of September 2005, David Mulford sent a cable to Condoleezza Rice where he first said that Indian officials were not being helpful, and he asked her to use her influence to persuade India to vote against Iran. That clearly shows that even as late as the morning of the 13th, India was reluctant to vote against Iran. Yet days after the meeting with George Bush, the Prime Minister sent instructions to Vienna that we should vote against Iran. Doesn't that chronology clinch it?
No, I think it proves that Iran was a difficult issue. Shyam Saran mentioned it to Ambassador Mulford during his early meetings, that we have interest in Iran. Iran is a key player to balance Pakistan. Iran is important for our strategic interests in Afghanistan, important supply of hydrocarbons. So we have to take a decision. That debate went on right till the meeting in New York, and I think India concluded that it was in our interest to vote against Iran at the IAEA.
I'm going to come back to Ambassador Mulford because I'm told that we're going to lose the satellite connection to London in a couple of minutes. I'll come to Enram a moment later. Ambassador Mulford, let's come to something else that's also in the leaks. This time it's your views of Indian cabinet reshuffles. When the reshuffle happened in 2006, you're quoted as having called Mani Shankar Iyer contentious and outspoken. You described Murali Deora as pro-US, and you said that the reshuffle where Deora replaced Iyer as petroleum minister was to ensure US-India relations continue to move ahead. You secondly said, and I quote, that there's an undeniable pro-American tilt to the cabinet reshuffle. Where did you get the confidence to come to that interpretation?
Well, it was my job to come to a conclusion on something as important as that, and it was obvious to me then, and remains obvious to me now, that during this period the U.S.-India strategic relationship was growing and strengthening and was a high priority for both of us. So developments of this kind were favorable to that continued development, and I was making that point.
And Ram, your paper has published that particular cable in a context where you sort of suggest that this is proof that there was American pressure on India at the time of this reshuffle in 2006. Are you sure that's the correct conclusion to come to?
Yes, sir, this is what we believe, but I just want to invoke this famous statement by C.P. Scott. Opinion is free. You can say interpretation is free here, but facts are sacred. That's the cable, and I'm delighted that implicit in this whole discussion, at least you take it for granted that this is what happened. These cables are true, even though they will not confirm it officially. Otherwise, we are wasting our time speaking about something that whose status is not clear.
Let me put
That's
it
what
like
delights me about this discussion, and I'm very grateful to Ambassador Mulford for the courtesy he has shown in responding to these questions.
Mr. Mansi, let me put it like this. Even if Ambassador Mulford is correct in saying that this is a pro-American reshuffle, is that necessarily embarrassing for the Indian government?
No, I think it's misinformed to call anybody pro-American or anti-American without proof. I think is erroneous.
Well, the ambassador may not have shared his proof with us, but he's an intelligent man and presumably he had good reasons for believing this is pro-American.
There's only one proof that is possible. Did these pro-American, so-called pro-American ministers change policy and favor the United States against India's national interests? I don't think there is any case there.
How do you, very quick, let me go to Ram. Let me go to Ram, answer that. Ram, how do you answer that particular point by Mr. Mansingh?
What's that point, Karan?
That the only proof that these ministers are pro-American is if they had changed policy in America's interest. They didn't do it. Therefore, the claim that they're pro-American is unfounded and unwarranted.
This is again a question of subjective interpretation from somebody who's held a high post, and people can come to their own views. This is our view.
Okay.
That this is what the ambassador says. He's no garden variety diplomat. Ambassador Mulford was a very high up diplomat in the U.S. administration. If I remember right, when he was at the Treasury in the 90s, the present Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner was his assistant.
Absolutely. I'll stop you there. You're absolutely right. Let's not waste time building up Ambassador Mulford. In fact, he was also an award-winning ambassador, an award that he won for the way he handled the Indian mission when he was in India. We have just about a minute and a half left. Let me come to the big, broad picture quickly. What, in your eyes, do these leaks amount to? How significant are they?
I think they just prove one thing, that Indian diplomats and American diplomats are doing their job with efficiency, with professionalism, doggedly defending their national interests.
One other quick question. Now that these leaks have been made public, and some people have had to deny their involvement in them, possibly rightly, possibly wrongly, but will this impair American diplomacy in India hereafter? Will Indians be worried and hesitant to talk to Americans openly and frankly?
I think temporarily this will put a lid on candid discussions, but Indians will be Indians. I think we'll come back to normal
Our
relations.
big mouth will always prevail in the end. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? And Ram, very quickly, should these have been published? Is there a greater public good which justifies the infringement of confidential official reports?
Absolutely, and here we are one with the New York Times, with the Guardian and the 3 other papers, and it's a growing list, and we have been responsible about
we seem to
taking
have
out
lost
names of people who... Yes.
You've taken out names of people who would have been compromised. You've been responsible, and as you say, you're at one with the New York Times and the Guardians in publishing WikiLeaks. I think that was what you were saying. I had to quickly summarize it because sadly we lost the connection at that point. We've come right to the end of this particular special last word. That will have to be the last word. I'm sorry that the satellite with Ambassador Mulford didn't last for the full duration. That happens sometimes with satellites. My thanks to Ram and Lalit Mansingh for joining me, and of course my thanks to Ambassador Mulford for making time for us and joining us from London. Goodbye. Good night.